Tonight on Reporting Scotland. A gang is sentenced to a total of 87 years for drugs, torture and firearms crimes.
This crime group were one of the most complex, they were one of the most dangerous, and tonight the people of Scotland can be reassured that 9 of the most violent men in Scotland are behind bars. Also on the programme, Michael O'Neill says no thanks to the offer of becoming the next national football manager. He's staying with Northern Ireland. A busy 24 hours as mountain rescue teams across the country are called out to a spate of emergencies. One hill walker is still missing on Ben Nevis. The women avoiding potentially life-saving smear tests because they're embarrassed to show their bodies to doctors. And we visit the small Sutherland community, home of Brora Rangers, who will be taking on Premier League Kilmarnock in the next round of the Scottish Cup. Good evening. A 9-man gang who were involved in drugs, firearms trafficking and torture have been given jail terms totalling nearly 90 years. The judge at the High Court in Glasgow said police had uncovered sophisticated, serious and organised crime involving an arsenal of deadly weapons. Detectives described the gang as 9 of the most violent men in Scotland. Katie Hunter reports.
Even by High Court standards, security was tight. The gang were driven into court surrounded by police vehicles on the ground and under surveillance from the air. Police say the 9 men were part of the most sophisticated organised crime gang they had encountered in Scotland. Inside the building there were armed officers. Courtroom number 3 was packed with police, journalists and members of the public. The 9 men sat in 2 rows, each flanked by a security guard. The gang remained silent as they were sentenced. They were jailed for a combined total of 87 years. We can't show pictures of 3 of the men for legal reasons.
It's been a very complex investigation. It has stretched and challenged all of Police Scotland's resources. This crime group were one of the most complex, they were one of the most dangerous, and tonight the people of Scotland can be reassured that 9 of the most violent men in Scotland are behind bars.
These were some of the guns police seized. Prosecutors said the gang's firepower was unprecedented in the history of organised crime in Scotland. Then there was the dirty money. About £1.6 million was recovered during police searches. David Sell was handed the longest sentence. He was jailed for 15 years and 8 months for his part in the abduction of drug dealer Robert Allen. The court heard Mr Allen had been driven from Yorkshire to an industrial unit in West Lothian, where he'd been stripped, beaten and sprayed with bleach. He was later taken to a rural location near East Kilbride, where he was shot 3 times in the legs. Judge Lord Beckett said Mr Allen, who survived, had been subjected to brutal and merciless torture. Some weapons police found were concealed in cars like this Honda. But there weren't just guns. This grenade was among the haul. Gerard Docherty was locked up for 10 years and 6 months for shooting at a house in Ratho, Edinburgh. The judge said Docherty lay in wait and his crime involved a high degree of planning. All 9 men had pleaded guilty to a range of charges. Police praised the victims for coming forward, but acknowledged there is still more to do.
I don't think we can underestimate the impact this crime group has. It truly has international links, and they're parts that we will still continue to investigate. But here back home in Scotland, the level of crime, the level of violence, the level of intimidation across other crime groups and some of the victims that we spoke about really was at the highest levels we've ever seen.
A judge will decide this week whether each of the gang should be served with a serious crime prevention order, which would place restrictions on their travel and internet access once they're released. Katie Hunter, Reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Michael O'Neill has turned down the chance to become the new Scotland manager. The Northern Ireland boss was the Scottish FA's preferred candidate to succeed Gordon Strachan, who left the position last year. The manager says it's not the right job at this time in his career. Well, our senior football reporter Chris McLaughlin joins us now from the National Stadium. Chris.
Well, Jackie, it's certainly not the news. The Scottish FA here at Hampden were hoping for. Their lengthy pursuit of their #1 target is indeed over, and now they have to start the process all over again. For over 3 months, he's been the SFA's most wanted. Today, from the Northern Ireland boss, it's thanks, but no thanks. He said, "I have decided not to take up the opportunity to become the next Scotland manager. It's a huge honour to be offered the position. However, I do not feel that this is the right opportunity for me at this moment in my career." So what now, and should criticism follow?
It looks embarrassing for the SFA and the board, and they've really got to they've got to come up with something that's going to catch the imagination of the support now. It's a very, very big call. It was a big call before this, but I think because of what has happened here, it becomes an even bigger call for the board, and to make sure that they get somebody in that's going to be successful.
And today that board was forced to respond to today's news. They said, "We now continue a recruitment process from the candidate list established by the selection committee, with a view to giving the new national coach ample time to prepare the squad for the UEFA Nations League." But just who can the SFA turn to now?
I don't know. I actually think we should maybe go for Alex McLeish again, possibly. He did quite a good job the last time he was in.
I would like to see a Scotsman, Alex McLeish, taking it. Yeah.
The chap who used to be in Nottingham Forest, Billy Davies, you could name a few of them. But I think it's to do with the players, just kind of got the players, you know.
With no competitive match until September, the head of the SFA, Stuart Regan, has time. But missing out on his #1 target brings fresh pressure and fresh expectation. Time for Plan B.
Well, Plan B indeed, Chris. The SFA have been after the man for some time now. Where does this leave the SFA?
Well, as I said earlier, Jackie, those on the 6th floor here at the National Stadium now have to start all over again. But it's hardly ideal, both organisationally and reputationally. Of course, Scotland don't have a competitive match until September. We know that already. But remember, whoever does come in to replace Gordon Strachan is going to know, because of this saga, that at the very best he is going to be second choice. Hardly ideal, although first things first, Jackie, they have to find him.
Thank you very much, Chris. Rescuers battled through snowdrifts for 2 hours to come to the aid of a man who'd been cut off with no power for a week at his home near Eskdalemuir in Dumfries and Galloway. The 64-year-old got into difficulty when he tried to walk to the nearest village. It was the latest in a series of rescues across the country over the weekend. Willie Johnson can tell us more.
Eskdalemuir saw some of the highest snowfall in the country last week. The village accessible today, but some outlying areas still cut off. Among them, the isolated home in a forest some distance from the nearest public road of the 64-year-old man at the centre of yesterday's drama.
He'd been stuck there for 7 days with no means of getting in or out, and also with no power. The electricity supply to the house had been lost. One can only imagine what conditions had become like after such a prolonged period.
In desperation, the man tried to walk 4 miles to the village, but the conditions defeated him and he was forced to call for help.
He was trying to wade through knee-deep snow at the minimum, and it was really hard going. Fortunately for us, he told us roughly where he was, so our guys walked in and found him, still standing, but very tired, very cold.
Last night, the Moffat team was called out again with colleagues from Tweed Valley, this time for 2 men who failed to return from a walk on the Southern Upland Way. After a long, cold night in the open, they were traced eventually at 5:30 this morning, after rescuers spotted their footsteps in the snow.
They were absolutely shattered. They'd severely underestimated the conditions they were having to walk in, and they were just so glad to get picked up and taken out.
Rescue teams in the north of Scotland have also been busy. This a dramatic moment on Saturday morning when 2 climbers were plucked from a mountain ridge 3,000 feet up in Glencoe, where they'd been stranded perilously all night. On Ben Nevis, a hill walker remains unaccounted for tonight after more than 24 hours on the mountain. 2 of his companions were found near the summit last night by Lochaber Mountain Rescue Team and led to safety. However, further searches have failed to find the 3rd man in what are said to be challenging conditions. And this is the West Highland rail line, closed by a landslide between Glenfinnan and Arisaig. A train with 5 passengers on board was derailed when tons of earth and rock washed onto the track. No one was injured. National Rail Inquiries says services between Fort William and Mallaig are expected to be suspended at least until Sunday. ScotRail will run replacement buses. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland.
The ferry operator Northlink says it's replacing plastic straws with paper ones on all its sailings in an effort to tackle plastic pollution. The company's also looking at replacing plastic bags, cold drinks cups and ramekin dishes with paper ones. Sachets of sauce will also be replaced with pump-action containers. It comes after a survey of beaches on Orkney found levels of plastic pollution were similar to those in heavily industrialised areas. Young women are avoiding getting potentially life-saving smear tests because they're embarrassed by the look and smell of their bodies. A survey for a health charity suggests a third didn't want to show their body to doctors. Cervical cancer is the most common cancer in women under 35. Suzanne Allen can tell us more.
Lauren Benny didn't have a smear test until she was 30. She felt uncomfortable and embarrassed.
I put off having a smear test for most of my 20s, and I did that for a number of reasons. I was embarrassed about how things might look down there to a medical professional. I thought about what kind of clothes to wear, matching underwear, which doesn't even matter when you actually do go there.
The results that came back were worrying.
About a week later after my smear test, I received the letter saying that I had abnormal cells and that it was classed as severe dyscorosis, so I was really at the top end of abnormalities.
Lauren now has the all clear, but many young women today feel the same as her, according to a survey from a health charity. It says a third of women 25 to 35 won't get a smear test because they're embarrassed about how their body looks and smells. The head of the charity says he's worried some women don't know the test even exists.
If women are being put off attending screening, there's a real risk that more women will be diagnosed and potentially will lose their lives. So it's absolutely imperative that we can find ways that make it one more accessible for women to attend cervical screening when invited, but also that they really understand what the test is for and that it is relevant to them.
Women are invited to come for screening from the ages of 25 right up until they're 65. And according to the latest figures, most women do. But still, a quarter of them don't. Figures for younger women are much worse. If you're in the 25 to 29 age group, well, less than 2/3 of you come for your test. And if you're in the 30 to 34 age group, well, they fare slightly better.
There's just a lot of stigma attached to the whole sort of idea of getting a smear test and things like that. I think a lot of young girls are hesitant to go, especially it's quite a daunting thing to go and do.
It is something that's quite personal. I don't think people understand other people who haven't been through it.
I would go for it definitely, because you'd rather be safe than sorry.
Here, all girls are offered the HPV vaccine from 11. It helps protect against the cancer. Some of the research shows women who've had it wrongly think they don't need to go for a smear test. However, cases of cervical cancer in Scotland continue to fall. Suzanne Allen, reporting Scotland.
It's nearly 17 minutes to 7, a reminder of tonight's top story. 9 members of a crime gang described as some of Scotland's most violent men are sentenced to nearly 90 years in jail for firearm trafficking, torture and drugs offences. And still to come, Highland Minnows Brora Rangers reach the 5th round of the Scottish Cup for the first time. The gap between rich and poor in Scotland is growing out of control, according to the charity Oxfam. A new report claims that globally, over 80% of wealth goes to the top 1% of earners. The charity wants governments across the world, including the Scottish Government, to take action to address economic inequality. Lisa Summers reports.
At Jerry's Cafe in Muirhouse, January is a lean month. All the while, the costs of running a business continue to rise.
It's much quieter at this time of year. We're not as busy as we are normally. December was busy, so now it's went really, really quiet, so paying bills and that seems to be a bit harder. Cost of living's gone up substantially, so to pay wages and to buy the food and whatever, it's a lot more expensive now than it used to be.
Customers like Caroline know how hard it is to get by. A bitter taste then to learn that the world's richest people are getting ever more wealthy.
I think it's a bit bad because we're all struggling to get a job that's decent pay, that we can pay our rent, pay council tax and get our shopping in. I mean, the shopping's even going up.
Today's report suggests the views of people here, in one of Scotland's most deprived communities, are reflected the world over. The figures compiled by Oxfam are global. They show 82% of the world's wealth goes to the top 1% of its population. Their wealth last year amounted to a staggering £585 billion. At the other end of the spectrum, the 3.7 billion poorest people saw no increase in their wealth.
We've got a pretty scary form of capitalism at the moment, a situation where the CEO of one of those big fashion companies can make in 4 days what someone working in one of his factories will make in her entire lifetime. That's a dire reflection on the state of the world's capitalism. So we need to very quickly turn our attention to how this economic model is operating and why it's not working for workers, and it's certainly not working for women around the world.
Oxfam argue that financial inequality is as relevant here in Scotland as it is across the world. They say that the richest 1% of the population own more wealth than the bottom 50% put together.
Here in St Andrews lies Scotland's most expensive street. The average house price is over £2 million. In the similarly exclusive resort of Davos, the world's wealthiest and most powerful will meet to discuss growing economies. Some disagree with Oxfam's findings. They say it's capitalism that's lifted billions out of poverty.
The way you lift people out of poverty isn't by reducing the wealth of the rich. It's by opening up to trade. And I think the best thing that we can do in the UK and in Europe is to lower our trade barriers and accept more goods from overseas, because that ultimately will be what lifts people out of poverty. That creates the ladder rather than just the handout.
Meanwhile, back here, the Scottish Government says it has bold measures in place to tackle poverty and inequality. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland. A Scottish Government minister is in Brussels to set out Scotland's position on Brexit. Fiona Hislop, the Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs, met David McAllister, a half-Scottish, half-German MEP. She's making the case for continued membership of the single market in the next phase of negotiations between the UK Government and the European Union. Police are warning motorists that they're cracking down on drivers without insurance. For the next week, officers will be carrying out mobile and static road checks. In 2017, more than 8,000 uninsured vehicles were seized. The Motor Insurers Bureau says thousands of people are injured every year by drivers with no insurance. A Labour MSP is asking for views on a plan to protect shop and bar staff from violence. Daniel Johnson wants to see new legislation creating offences around the assault and abuse of workers who sell age-restricted items such as alcohol and cigarettes. Mr Johnson said the proposal comes at a time when such attacks are at a 10-year high. Now, they might not have been dancing in the streets of Brora at the weekend, but football fans there had something to celebrate when the little-known Highland League team reached the 5th round of the Scottish Cup for the first time in its history. The part-timers from Sutherland will now face Premiership side Kilmarnock. Ian McInnes reports.
It was an early game-changer. Colin Williamson's 12th minute header prompting celebrations on the pitch and much, much further afield.
The supporters were delighted. I watched it several times yesterday, and there were grown men crying, and they've supported the club through the hard times. And it's not just for the players; it's for the people behind the scenes.
In the small Sutherland village this morning, delight mixed with pride on the streets.
It was excellent. I never expected it. Fair play to them.
It was brilliant. It was a great day out. Great fans on the way down. It was a good laugh, and the boys winning. That was pretty good.
For the players, though, no time to dwell.
How was it coming back to work today?
It wasn't too bad. A bit more energy than I did yesterday morning. It was a tough game. We went down there with sort of some hopes that we might get a win or get a draw. We'd been going down as underdogs, and a lot of people probably didn't expect us to get a result. But after beating Stranraer, we were sort of quietly confident amongst ourselves we would get a win.
All eyes here in Brora were on the draw for the next round of the Cup yesterday, but they won't be welcoming a visiting team here to Dudgeon Park. Instead, it's another long trip south to Premiership Kilmarnock.
Indeed, after a 600-mile round trip to Stranraer in the third round, a 500-mile round trip to Rugby Park now awaits these fans.
The draws have not been terribly kind to us in terms of travelling. By the time this this draw is our trips are finished for this one. We'll have done a distance roughly the same as Edinburgh to Moscow via London.
The players then on top of the world, but the manager knows it'll be far from easy against Kilmarnock.
We are massive underdogs. They're SPL class players, a lot of ex-Rangers players in there as well. So we're just looking for not a day out. You know, it's not my mentality to go down and just enjoy the day. We'll go there and put a show on and show how good a team we are.
But for these hardy northern fans, the hope is that the magic of the Cup and the emotion will continue at Rugby Park. Ian McInnes reporting Scotland in Brora.
The composer, Sir James Macmillan, is to create a work celebrating the words of an Aberdeenshire poet who died in the First World War. Charles Hamilton Sorley was just 20 when he died at the Battle of Loos. Despite writing only a handful of poems, he's regarded as one of the most significant war poets. The musical commission will be performed to mark the centenary of the First World War armistice at the Tryst Festival in Cumnock and at the Barbican in London. It's part of a UK-wide arts programme which also includes 2 Gaelic works marking the sinking of the Islair in Stornoway Harbour, which killed 200 returning servicemen. Now, a bird watcher who was on the lookout to snap the smallest bird in Scotland got a substantially bigger picture in his lens, a pod of humpback whales frolicking in the Firth of Forth. Cameron Buttle reports.
The whales were first spotted breaking the surface of the Firth of Forth on Saturday, in quite magnificent style, backlit by the sun off the Fife coast. As the day progressed, unsuspecting birdwatcher Adrian Plum caught more than he bargained for when he captured one splashing around with Edinburgh Castle as a backdrop to a picture that has sent enthusiasts running to the shore to catch a glimpse of the whales. The humpback is also famous for its singing, but only the males, like these ones filmed in Shetland. A song can last for 20 minutes, and they may keep bashing them out for 24 hours at a time. Once nearly hunted to extinction, the population now sits at around 80,000 worldwide. Seeing a humpbacked whale anywhere along the Firth of Forth would truly be a spectacular sight. It's not known exactly how many there are out there, but it's certainly thought to be more than one. And the pictures are definitely catching people's imaginations, with spotters out all over the Firth of Forth all over the weekend. But there are concerns about anyone trying to get a closer look at these magnificent creatures. Tonight, Scottish Natural Heritage has asked people out watching on boats to be careful and follow the wildlife watching code. Keep your distance, at least 100 metres, and back off if the whale appears to be in distress. A spokesman added that there are more sightings of whales and it's always possible that they will come closer to shore looking for food. Cameron Buttle reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, whales are obviously used to the freezing temperatures of recent days, but would you consider taking a dip outdoors? Well, this man thought it was a good idea. Norman Todd, an experienced open water swimmer, was filmed swimming in a Highland loch without a wetsuit, with temperatures reaching -8. The oil worker spent 10 minutes in the water at Loch Garscarnoch as part of his training for a wild swimming event. Norman, well, if you're in a quandary about tomorrow and your dip, Christopher has the weather. What do you think? Should he?
I couldn't possibly comment. Not for me, though. No. Thank you very much indeed. Hello there. It was really quite a snowy Sunday, wasn't it? And temperatures for many were barely above freezing. But contrast that with today, really quite mild, up to 7 to 9 Celsius in places. Still a fair amount of snow on the ground in places, though. Lovely picture from one of our weather watchers near Pitlochry. But as the thaw sets in, a fairly sorry-looking snowman in Stornoway. And tonight, breezy with some rain on the way. But at the moment, it's reasonably dry, just a few light showers. Then overnight through the early hours, heavy rain pushing in across parts of the northwest and moving eastwards. And those winds from the south or southwest strong, perhaps gale force at times on the west coast. Town and city temperatures around 4 to 6 Celsius, but a few sheltered glens in the northeast, perhaps seeing a touch of frost. So tomorrow, it's a cloudy, wet, windy morning, but it should improve. That heavy rain clearing its way eastwards, so come lunchtime, early afternoon, something a little bit drier, a little bit brighter. Still a few showers around, still quite windy from the southwest. But look at the temperatures by mid-afternoon. 10, 11 Celsius quite widely, perhaps up to 12 in 1 or 2 sheltered spots in the southwest. The best of the sunshine always to be found towards the east coast, towards parts of East Lothian, Fife, Angus, Aberdeenshire and towards Murray as well. Further west, some brighter moments but cloudier here with frequent showers and again windy around the western northwest coast. And the rest of the afternoon into the evening, little in the way of change at first, still windy from the southwest, still quite showery. And then overnight, an area of low pressure arrives, bringing some very wet and some very windy weather. Here's the chart, you'll see what I mean. We've got this little feature here developing. It's an area of low pressure which will spin its way across the country, bringing gale or severe gale force winds, some heavy rain, but bear in mind it's through the early hours. However, come first thing Wednesday morning, still feeling the effects of it, still quite wet at times in the north and northwest, still quite windy, but a slow improvement, and certainly by the afternoon there will be some brighter moments, but showers never far away. Look at the temperatures though, on their way down. And looking ahead towards Thursday, that trend continues because whilst we're still under the influence of low pressure, these systems pulling out of the way, and that means we'll have a cold northerly wind coming down from the Arctic with a few wintry showers at times. So temperatures on the way up tomorrow, but then quickly on the way back down again by Wednesday and Thursday. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And now just time for a reminder of tonight's main news. The court has heard that a man who drove a van into a crowd of people near two mosques in North London last year wanted to kill as many Muslims as possible. 48-year-old Darren Osborne denies killing one man and attempting to murder others. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and of course with our late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from all the team, good evening.